Hey, welcome back. I should probably mention every episode that I'm feeling weird. I got like a weird headache, but I'm okay. But just in case you're wondering, why is this episode so much weirder and quieter? Nobody is wondering that. I sound exactly the same, I'm sure. That's a good thing about having low energy, is like you're just always kind of the same. I did have a couple therapy... Oh, I can't do this one. A couple therapy things that I forgot to mention yesterday. Because I went to the doctor yesterday. I kind of wanted to mention this, but I forgot. Because I wanted to sound smart. Because I know this like mathematical term. And it's this statistical term, and I'm like, oh, this kind of applies to how I'm feeling. I was having, for some reason I kept having a hard time explaining, like, well, the reason why I started taking the medicine is because my job was really hard and I was feeling really depressed about job stuff and everything. And once I started taking the medicine, the job stuff got easier, so I'm not sure if the medicine is helping me or just my situation. Obviously it's probably just like a little bit of both, but the term to describe that is called regression to the mean in statistics. Because the reason why I started taking the depression medicine is because I was feeling the worst I had ever felt. Ever. So like if you're charting it on a graph, it's like, oh, my whole life I feel like this, and there's like a little bit, and then it dips down, and then this is when I start taking the medicine. So if your average happiness is a line here, and you're dipped all the way down, there's a percentage, like the odds are it's gonna regress back to the mean of your entire life. The odds are it's not going to keep getting worse. I mean, it could. The example they always give is like baseball and stuff, where if a player has the best year they've ever had, sometimes there's some regression because they're going to have a even better year next year. Usually there's some regression. Like if they've been playing for 5 years and they have like this year's okay and this year's a little bit better and this year's a little bit worse and then this year's amazing, usually you don't see another jump up. You see a kind of regression back to the mean. But sometimes you don't. I mean, sometimes they kind of stay. Like DeGrom has been kind of crazy. He's staying up here. I always thought they gave him a contract a couple years ago, and I was like, maybe it's not the best idea to give him this huge contract after he wins the Cy Young, because that's his best year ever. So maybe wait till next year when there's some regression. But the next year he didn't regress. He got even better. He won another Cy Young. So he's a anomaly. He's like ridiculous freak of nature. So that was I was like, oh, I should have said that because I want him to think I'm smart. But yeah, that's like, I think that's why sometimes you have to account for that if you're doing like a scientific study of depressing people. Because, well, that's why you need a control group. Because you're like, well, there's going to be some regression to the mean here, so we need to account for that. So if you have 100, I think I might have even talked about this before. If you have 100, if you're doing a test to see if antidepressant medicine works, so you take 100 people who are depressed, and you give them the medicine. And then you have to have a control group. So you take 100 people who are depressed, but you don't give them the medicine, and see how many of the depressed people just feel better naturally, and how many feel better with the medicine. If it's more with the medicine, then you know the medicine works. But if you don't have the control group and you're like, oh, 10 people got better with the medicine, it's like, wait, maybe that's just regression to the mean. I'm stuck here. I can't do this. I need the ice beam. This looks like you're supposed to do something, right? But it could be a power bomb. This game does do a good job of funneling you into an area and then being like, you can't go back. So you know, I mentioned this before, but like I always get frustrated with puzzle games where you're like, I don't know if I have everything I need to solve this puzzle. But I must, because the game forced me into this area and I can't go back. So I must have everything I need, right? Yoip. I had another therapy note. I think tomorrow I'll talk about gay people. What was the other note? My whole life is a hump I've never gotten over. Yeah, that was something that I said during therapy that I kind of liked. Which is kind of like a fun little quote that I had. Because she's like, she keeps saying, like, oh, you just gotta keep trying and you gotta get over that hump. And I'm like, I feel like I've been trying my whole life. What more do I have to do? I'm trying. I'm trying, right? I just feel like my whole life's been a hump, and I've never gotten to the other side of the hump. I don't know how to... He's like, oh, you keep working at it and you'll get over that hump. I've been working at it my whole life. What do I have to do? When do I get over the hump? That's the frustrating part. I don't see real progress. Where do I go? Do I do the super missile in here? No. This is where you're supposed to be. Norfair. That's what it said in the walkthrough. It says go to Norfair. That's where I'm going. My whole life is a hump, and I had one more thing. That's dumb. Do you want to talk about Bible stuff? I've read Kings. So, what was the last book I talked about? I've read Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Then it's Samuel, Kings. I don't really like Kings. And now I'm on Chronicles. Today I was reading Chronicles. Kings is kind of a little bit boring. It's just about all the kings of Judah and Israel. So, after David is the first king... No, Saul is the first king of the united Judah and Israel. Then after David... then there's Solomon, who's David's son. And he like worships the wrong gods, and God's like, okay, I'm going to separate your kingdom from Israel because of this. So Israel is the northern kingdom and Judah is the southern, and the southern kingdom is like the lineage of David, so it's like the good one, and Israel is like kind of the one that keeps sinning. I can't do that, right? So then Kings is just the lines of Israel, and there's like 10 kings in each, Israel and Judah, and it's like what they did, and they had their wars, and then eventually I don't have the thing, right? No. Eventually the last king of Judah and Israel, like, they do something really bad. It's always the bad thing they do is just they worship other gods, which is kind of frustrating. You wish God would be like, oh, this king had slaves, so that's why we're doing this bad thing. But it's always just like, oh, they had a statue of another god, so they were bad, they were detestable to God or whatever. that would be a good opportunity for God to to expand on some rules, like this guy ate pork, so that was detestable. But it's always the same thing. It's always just they worshipped other gods, and so God didn't like that, and then he kind of kills the king or whatever. That's the other thing that it makes me so sad, because like it's so much murder. Monarchies is like such a dumb system. If you have a system where every 10 years your leader gets murdered by a group of like murderers, and then the murderers become king, that's kind of a terrible governing system, right? There's no wonder why we stick with democracy when all the other systems are so terrible. Like, democracy it's not great, but monarchies are so stupid. That's what happened. You have a king for 10 years, and then he's just basically spending 90% of his energy trying to avoid getting murdered. Then one day he slips up, he gets murdered. Then his son becomes king, who's like 10 years old. So the murderers are like, if we get this 10-year-old to be the king, we can kind of get him to do whatever we want. No, yeah, you can't do that. I don't know where to go, so I'm just going to wander around. So then the murderers basically become the leaders. So then you're constantly like being rewarded for murdering people, and it's such a dumb system. Imagine if like Biden murdered Trump and then he's just like, okay, now I get to be president. What? You go to jail where murderers go. You don't get to become king. It's stupid. But he's got to become king because he's his son. What? Why? Doesn't make any sense. I guess monarchy is better than just randomly... No, it's not. I think it would be better to just randomly pick a king. Like, just have a lottery and be like, okay, every 15 years we have a lottery and someone and the citizenry just becomes king. I was like, okay. That would be better. I don't know where to go. This isn't right. Ooh, it's over. That's it for today. But let's look at where I'm supposed to go next. Bobby Cuts. Who's Bobby Cuts? The trial of Bobby Lee Cuts. Did he kill somebody? Well, he killed a white person, so that doesn't count. I don't think he was even on duty when he did it. Yeah, that's the whole thing, is like, cops always protect other cops who are on duty, because they're like, well, when I'm on duty, I don't want people to be judging me for what I do. So it is a huge deal that this guy got convicted. It's crazy. I didn't realize how crazy it was. Okay, I'll do this. I got the jump boots. Okay, see you tomorrow. Thanks.